Before this video starts, I would like for each and every one of my new subscribers, you guys, to go check out Henry Tales. If you guys love the horror stories that I do, then you guys are going to love Henry Tales. Basically, it's a community channel where a bunch of narrators like myself come together to put out content that you guys will enjoy. So, once again, if you guys enjoy my content and you really like the scary things that I read, you're gonna love Henry Tales. I can't tell you how many times a week I watch a Henry Tales video and I piss my pants because of it. Thank you guys, and I can't wait to see you there. Warning, if you do not like gore or vomit, I suggest staying away from this story. Centibreed by u/Ivan the Guppy. Holy crap, babe, wait up for me, Abby said to her fiancé, Clive, as she struggled to keep up with the pace he set. He paused, turned towards her, and smiled. We're never going to make it to the top before sunset if you don't hurry. You're an ass, you know that? She said loudly as she ducked under a branch, finally catching up to him. Come on, we're almost there, Clive said to her in a quieter voice. You're doing great. Just a bit more. Did you have to pick such a difficult climb for my first hike? She asked. It's not that bad, he said back with a knowing grin. It'll be worth it, I promise. They crested the final rise after walking a bit further. Abby gasped audibly and said to Clive, Oh my god, it's beautiful! The sun was almost to the tree line, casting long shadows among the trees. The leaf-strewn ground began to take on a golden hue as it began to dip lower in the cool autumn sky. A small lake glimmered below them in the dying light. Clive suddenly pulled apart from her and reached into his pack, startling her a little. Abby looked at him oddly for a moment as he fumbled around. He stopped digging after a few seconds. Looking up at her, he grinned widely. Abby Winters, Clive said as he got to one knee. Will you marry me? Abby began to cry a little, bringing her hands to her mouth. Yes, I will, Clive Stevens. Elated, she allowed him to slip a modest-sized ring onto her finger. The two embraced for a few moments, then turned to watch the sun fade till it was almost gone. Clive set his pack down and pulled out a small lantern. If you want to get the stove going, I'll get everything else set up, babe. Okay, was all Abby said. She hadn't really been able to find any words since he had proposed. Their eyes met for a moment, and they grinned like a couple of kids on Christmas morning. They were laying under the stars, holding hands under the sleeping bags they had zipped together. The sun had long disappeared, and the moon now cast an eerie gray glow around them. Soft clouds occasionally drifted over them, turning everything dark except for the small circle of light radiating from the lamp. That was amazing, Abby said, turning her head towards Clive, an obvious smile in her voice. They cuddled up a little bit closer, their faces touching. He stroked her hair and wrapped his legs around hers. Ouch! She said loudly and jerked back, giving him a light, playful slap on the chest. You really need to trim your toenails, dude. What are you talking about? He asked her, somewhat taken aback. I have my socks on. She paused for a moment, then quickly began to wiggle out of her sleeping bag on her elbows. What's wrong? He questioned her again. There's something in our bag, she said quickly. What? Clive said, starting to feel a tickling sensation rising up his leg. Shit! Clive kicked out of the sleeping bag. Jumping up, he grabbed the lantern and turned it to its full brightness. He lowered it to the open sleeping bag. A centipede, about 7 inches long, crawled out. Each of its legs had to be at least a quarter the size of its body. The thing's antenna twitched in the air, searching. Clive cursed under his breath. Kill it! Abby squeaked out. Do something! Clive quickly glanced around, finding a flat rock by his feet. He brought the rock down on top of it, making a clear crunching noise. He pulled the rock away, revealing a nasty dark stain on the ground. Gross, was all he said as he brought the rock closer to the lamp. What was left of the centipede spasmed a few more times, then slid off. Is your leg okay? Clive asked Abby. It's not my leg, it's my foot, and it hurts like hell, she said with some revulsion at the sight of the thing covering her mouth with an arm. Please check on my foot. That damn thing bit me. Clive bent low with the lamp, examining her foot. Well, it's not the worst looking thing ever. At least you'll have something to remember tonight by. Hold on, I have some cream in my bag. Clive walked to his bag and pulled out some ointment. He shoved the dead insect away with his foot as he came back. Okay, this should make it feel better, Clive said as he popped the top and squeezed some onto his index finger. As he began to spread the gel over the bite, a soft lump shifted a little under his pressure. Clive stopped for a second, unsure of what he actually felt. Cringing some inside, he glanced up. Okay. I'll stay up and make sure nothing else gets you, m'lady, he said with a forced grin. After he turned the sleeping bag inside out no less than 3 times and moved their sight a few meters further down, Abby nestled back in to attempt to get more sleep. Clive lounged in a camp chair next to Abby, occasionally pacing, watching her as she became more and more restless throughout the night. Clive woke with a start, feeling something crawling up his leg. Quickly glancing down, his heart began to race. Nothing. He bent over and put his hands on his knees, attempting to slow his heart rate. Looking over to Abby, he saw that her face was lined with drops of sweat and had a pallid color to it. The first tinges of worry began to creep into him. He shook Abby's shoulder gently. Hey babe, how are you feeling? He asked with concern in his voice. He shook her twice before she cracked her eyes open. Like smashed ass, Abby said, forcing a crooked smile. What time is it? Looking up again into the sky, Clive answered, probably around 7. I'm gonna go get some food going for you. Let's get you sitting up first. Clive brought the chair he had been in over, helping Abby to her feet. He noticed that the spot where the centipede had bitten her was at least double in size, now an angry red welt the size of a quarter. He applied more of the ointment to her foot after she was seated, noticing that the lump he had felt before had disappeared. Clive thought this was a little strange, but shook it off. Alright, we need to get going soon. I think we need to get you to a doctor. You look like hell, Clive said as he began heating a small packet of food for her. No argument there, Abby said in a slightly shaky voice. I can still walk though. No need to airlift me out of here. Clive looked over what had been their camping area, making sure all was packed up, and the two set off at a slow pace. The spot where the dead centipede was still there, a flat, bloodied body still partly lying on the rock that had smashed it the night before. Torn apart limbs strewn about like a spider's broken limbs. Its large antenna still searching. Clive felt disgusted to see the thing in the light, and couldn't look away. Clive! Abby broke him from his trance. Come on! Yeah, he said, finally looking away. Let's go. Abby had quite a bit of trouble navigating at times during the hike back, but Clive didn't tease her like he had the day before. They had to stop multiple times during the hike back to their vehicle, him inspecting her foot each time. He was becoming increasingly concerned. The bite was no longer a quarter-sized welt anymore, but now covered most of the top of her foot and had sent dark red spidery lines halfway up her leg. Clive had to help her limp the last few hundred feet back to the car, leaning her against the hood when they arrived. He packed all their gear into the car, helped her in the passenger seat, and hopped behind the wheel. Abby, who now complained of having shooting pains running from her leg to her neck, lay back in the fully reclined passenger seat, sweating profusely. Hang on, babe. We're going to the ER, Clive said to Abby, his apprehension rising as he watched his fiancée begin to writhe in agony. After fumbling with his phone's map application to find the nearest hospital, he slammed his foot on the gas pedal, the car biting into the gravel for traction. Racing down the road towards the main highway, he noticed Abby had become still. Abby? Abby! He had to yell to get her attention. She cracked her eyes a bit. Yeah, she said through pale lips. Shit, don't do that to me, he said, his eyes wide with fear. We're about 30 minutes from the hospital in Ashton. No rush, dear. I'll be fine, she said, obviously trying to crack a joke. Clive didn't reply. He drove at dangerous speeds on the nearly deserted highway, passing 120 at times. Trees flew by in a blur as motorists veered to the side to avoid him. He made it to Ashton in less than 15 minutes. The hospital was just inside the city limits, so after taking a few short turns, they found themselves outside the emergency room in no time. He rushed inside, frantic to find help. My wife! She needs help! Please! Clive almost screamed as he struggled to find words. Okay, sir, what seems to be the problem? The attendant at the front desk asked politely. My wife! She fucking needs help! He did yell this time. The security guard that had been sitting down set down his paper and stood up. Sir, please, he said. Get a stretcher! She's out in the car! Clive interrupted the guard. By this time, orderlies had begun to jump into action. Rushing out to the car, Clive followed. He was not prepared for the change in Abby when he went back outside. Abby, now completely catatonic, lay in the car. She was staring blankly at the roof, her mouth opened in a rictus of suffering. Clive looked her over. What the hell? He said quietly. Abby's lower midsection was slightly bloated. The buttons on her shirt strained, wicked-looking red streaks her neck, reaching towards her face. Okay, get a stretcher out here, now, one of the orderlies yelled. Clive backed away so they could take her inside. They quickly rushed her to a private room, Clive having been left to give the front attendant some information. You say she was bitten by a centipede? The woman asked. Yes, we were hiking last night and she was bitten, Clive answered, somewhat exasperated. Okay, sir, would you mind? She was cut off as someone banged the ER door open and called for Clive. Sir, your wife is asking for you. I think you need to come see her, they said, seeming to struggle for words. The nurse hurried back through the door. Clive closed behind. They turned a few corners and finally arrived at Abby's room. He stopped just inside the door, staring in disbelief at Abby. She was almost unrecognizable. Her face, now bloated as well, was flushed red. Dark red splotches covered it. Breathing tubes had been inserted into her nose and she had been hooked up to an IV. Her shirt lay open so they could inspect the swelling, blistering skin lesions that were forming in many places. What the hell is going on? He said with confusion, looking at the nurse. We don't know, one nurse with a shaky voice kept repeating. A loud crack resounded and they all looked to the bed. Abby, her back now snapped in two, was arched like a triangle. One of the nurses turned to the side and vomited. What the fuck? Clive muttered in abject horror. Abby's stomach began to throb uncontrollably. Black, spindly, arm-like appendages became visible through her skin. Her chest turned a wicked blood color. Her limbs contorted to impossible angles, and gore flew everywhere as her body split in two down the middle with a slick, slicing noise. Her head sliding to one side, something out of a fucking nightmare emerged from what was once a human being. Large blood-red appendages bent out at every angle, ending in points as sharp as a knife. Bits of Abby sloughed off the thing's body as it rose to its full height on the hospital bed. Clyde couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Abby, he said as he sank to his knees in spreading blood. Hands covered his face to try and block out the horror in front of him. Clive began sobbing. The nurses clambered out of the room, falling over each other. One of the nurses hit her head on the door's threshold as she fell with a ringing whack. The thing turned its head towards the noise, and Clive finally got a good look at it in its entirety. The fucking thing was at least 7 feet tall, pincers the size of Clive's arm at the bottom, 2 enormous antennae on top, an impossibly large mouth held equally sized fangs pointing inward. Clive threw up his hands as he saw Abby's face melting off one of its teeth, hanging from her mouth. Clive fell to his side. unresponsive but still seeing everything. His eyes became unfocused as the thing slid off the bed with soft clinks, pulling the soaked sheets with it. He heard a soft purring noise as the monster approached, noticing before he blacked out the tiny segmented bodies of things crawling in the wet bed sheets.